What symptoms or symptoms leading up to diagnosis?
Well, you'll work it out as we go along.
Oh, okay.
Okay, right.
Because there's a bit of a gap between
Yeah.
one and the other.
Just answer the questions and you'll be fine.
Right. Okay.
Okay. I'd like to introduce Katherine from Spain, who has multiple sclerosis. Welcome, Katherine.
Hi.
Could you tell us when you first started getting your MS symptoms?
I was diagnosed in 2000, and that year I'd had a number of strange incidents of pains and loss of colour to my vision, and none of which sent me to the doctor until one day I got out of my car, and I don't drive, by the way, somebody else was driving, and I suddenly had double vision. And at that time I was living in Asia, so it was a very strange situation because there is basically no more MS in Asia. Well, there's now slightly more than there was because people stay indoors more, but at that time there wasn't any. And it was double vision was. I thought, well, it's a blocked sinus or something like that. But eventually, they sent me to see a neurologist because they reckoned it. The doctor in the medical centre showed me a page where it said double vision in his book of symptoms, and I read them and I thought, I don't want any of these diseases, thank you very much. They all look really serious. So they sent me off to Singapore, which is a centre of excellence, and then I had an MRI test the next morning, and then I was diagnosed. And so it was just a number of odd, sort of every 6 or 8 weeks or so, or I'd have every 2 or 3 months I'd had an odd episode which would last about 6 weeks, and then something else would happen. And that was just life, I suppose. I just expected odd things to happen because I'm a woman and odd things happen.
So how did it make you feel being diagnosed with MS?
I thought immediately, okay, right, I'm going to go and buy lots of books. So I said to my neurologist, can I go across the road and buy lots of books? And I was idly thinking of how everybody would be running after me, and I'd be sort of lounging around. And then I realised that my husband was sweating and he was trembling. And so I stopped that train of thought and became extremely rational. And we went and bought books, and I calmed him down. So I spent the first couple of weeks making sure that he wasn't anxious at all about it. So I didn't allow myself to be anxious. I just thought, well, we'll just get past one thing and then another thing. And actually that was quite sensible in a way, because if you just leave something long enough, it goes away on its own. So, in terms of panic. And I'd had a friend who was my singing teacher who'd been diagnosed with PPMS. It turned out she didn't have PPMS in the end. She had Hughes disease. So
Right.
It was a bit of a strange coincidence. So I did know a little bit, but I went and read everything I could possibly find. And I felt okay. I just thought, well, this isn't necessarily going to happen to me, whatever it was I read about in books. Very optimistic.
So did your symptoms... what am I trying to say? Let's start that question again.
Okay.
So did your MS advance after you'd been diagnosed?
Yes, it got really bad for the first 2 months. It was awful. I'd walked into the hospital and with my double vision, and 2 months later I could barely crawl. I was so ill. I looked like a zombie. I looked terrible. I felt terrible, and that was it. It wasn't saying it was advancing. I was just being hit by one attack after another. And I think that was the steroid treatment, which left me open to infections. And this being Asia, infections can be, it's not exactly the most healthy place in the world. And I got hit with infections, which then triggered another relapse with more like attacks. And by that time, I was numb from the waist down, and I had to remember to go to the loo every hour or so that I could get to the bladder. I could do it, but I couldn't feel it full. So I basically lost all sense of feeling, and continence was there, but it was by the book, by the hour, rather than me feeling the urge to go to have a pee or something.
Yeah.
And at that point they said, I think you should try and start some sort of drugs, but the only drug you can start is Rebus because it's the only thing that's licensed, and it's because there's no MS in Asia, so you have to start rebus because that's the only thing it's licensed for encephalitis. So, and to my enormous surprise, it worked, and I did stop it and calm it down. And it's possibly that I think with the steroids and then getting hit by one infection and then another and getting weird ones that only babies should have, I think it would have carried on. And every time I have a relapse, I have different symptoms. So it gave it a chance to recover.
Mm-hmm. So how did you find LDN?
Well, I had a friend at the time. This is 2000, and the MS on the internet was kind of just it was big. There was internet forums in America, but there wasn't really anything much in the UK. I joined Julie's joint, and I met a guy who was a man who was living near where we used to live. Was living in Yorkshire, who had been on LDN for a number of years, and he was telling me about it, but I didn't find out really about it until about 2001, 2002, just before we came back to the UK. Mm-hmm. And had I asked my neurologist in Singapore about it, he'd probably looked it up and said, yes, go ahead, take it. But I didn't know about it. So then I was stuck in the sort of limbo of neurologists don't know anything about it, and then you've got doctors who disagree with each other who do prescribe it, and so I was left knowing about it, but being told not to take it under any circumstances because it would do something terrible to my relapsing and remitting MS and it wouldn't work, and it was all wrong. But now we know, and then we didn't. So things have improved a great deal since then.
So when did you start LDN?
I tried it for a while in 2005, and I thought that for some reason that it might help, but it didn't really seem to do anything to be honest at the time, and it was only for a couple of months or so. And then I started in 2008, and having bought some from a pharmacy in America, I'm not sure whether I'd say that, but anyway, I'd stopped taking Rebus because I run out because we moved to Spain, and so I started on LDN. I had to make my own and titrate it, and we came up with a formula for getting the right dosage. And so it was 2008, mm-hmm. September, October 2008.
Are you still there?
Mhm. Yes.
Oh, sorry. I thought I'd lost you.
No.
Okay. So when you first started when you first started LDN, did you notice any side effects?
Wonderful dreams, amazing dreams, the best dreams in the whole world, and that was pretty quick. That was within the first week or so, and I really did quite enjoy that phase. It was like being in a movie. They were good dreams, interesting dreams, not bad ones. And then after about 2 weeks, I realised that my urgency, I had a slightly urgent bladder. I just wasn't waking up in the night to go for a pee anymore, and I suddenly realised that I had absolutely normal bladder function. There was no no retention, no urgency, no horrible accidents, which had